Guys, welcome back to the channel. This video, I've actually filmed this at home already, but then I got here, realized I didn't do a great job kind of introing it, as well as thanking a few people. So this video is not going to be about how to do the swap. This video is going to be about why the heck did it take so long to put a DSG into a VR Tiguan. Most of that comes down to this guy, my time and schedule, but I'll explain why that took so long in this video. So that's coming up. I'm actually at my pizza shop right now. That's a huge reason to why this took me so long is I'm here all the time. I am not a mechanic by trade. I don't do this for a living. I sit here and make pizzas all day and then have to go home and do paperwork. Like, it's a lot. I'm at least 60 hours a week invested into these shops. So anyways, yeah, so that's what this video is going to be about. But the big thing I wanted to kind of go backwards and touch on here before we get into the video is to thank a few people. So there's the wiring is the biggest thing. Diagrams I'm okay at. I can work my way through them. I can chip through them. I have access to them all. And I was starting to kind of chip through, figuring out the wiring on this. And then one of my friends over in the UK that did a 3-2 swap on his Tiguan 4Motion as well. He also DQ 250 swaps, so DSG swapped his Tiguan. He's now also gone further, and they have access to the DQ 500, I believe it is, 7-speed DSGs, put that in. But anyway, so thank you to Aaron for helping with all the wiring, walking me through the diagrams or the spreadsheets that he had, translating a little bit of terminology stuff for me. And just being there constantly during that wiring process, bouncing ideas back and forth. Thankfully, he was available while I was actually sitting there doing the wiring, and he helped huge on clarifying a few things. So thank you to him. From there, there's always Chobi 94 Co. He's got a 3.6 swapped GTI. His is manual. He hasn't really done this DSG part a lot, but he has a crazy amount of knowledge on Volkswagens in general, but especially when it comes to really anything 3.6 or VR. So he was a huge help, and if he didn't know the answer, he, without me asking, went out and found answers for me. So thank you, Chobi. And then there's both Alexes. The Alex that ended up finding me this transmission, he also helped with a few ideas. There's Alex, who, one of my friends, who did a 2.5 DSG swap recently. I helped provide him some answers while he was doing his, as I was kind of paused out in the middle of mine, but had already kind of crossed a few of the bridges that he had troubles with. But then he also helped me in return because he finished his way sooner than mine, because they dealt with all these other issues. So thank you to both of them. Thank you to Emerson, who helped me with the original VR wiring on the Tiguan when it did the swap. He also had some answers and ideas for me, and I was also able to link up with another person who has an exact version of this swap, 3.6 BLV. It's a 09, I think 09, maybe 2010. So anyways, a Gen 1 Tiguan with a 4Motion DSG. No one knows about it. Honestly, don't fully remember his name right now. Should have looked that up before I did this. But thank you to him. Any knowledge that he did have, he was able to help with. So that was huge. And so thank you to everybody. I'm sure there's a few people that I'm missing. A lot of people there for motivation and little answers throughout the way. But thank you to everybody who helped and motivated me to get this done and answered questions that I did have. And enjoy the rest of the video. Figured it was finally time to jump on here and explain the DSG swap in the VR6 Tiguan. I meant to document this entire process, honestly, and put up a whole video of the swap, going through it. I filmed a ton of it. And then chaos happened. And so I stopped filming, just put my head down and tried to figure out and get the project right, as opposed to film a video. So what do we got? We've got the 3.6 swapped 2009 Tiguan. It is a 4Motion. That's a very big point in this video, is it is an all-wheel drive Tiguan. I maintained that during the swap. I pulled the motor and transmission, factory transmission, from the Passat 4Motion that it was in. That is a non-DSG car. That is an 09G transmission vehicle. So the swap was always still 4Motion, and I would never have it any other way. Of course, I could delete it, make it front wheel drive, but I live in Canada, hence the thicker jacket. I'm cold right now. I'm also being a baby. It's not that cold yet, especially for November. But anyways, so it was a must for all-wheel drive to be maintained in this car. For me, anyways, just a preference. It's also way more fun to drive. I lost the all-wheel drive going to Wookiees in the Woods, and it was not near as much fun as it could have been on those roads driving in front-wheel drive. Kind of had to relearn how to drive. So definitely didn't like that. Anyways, what we ended up finding first out of the States was a transmission out of an 08-ish TT, so a Mark II TT. And that was from what was supposed to be a trusted source. And I can't necessarily blame it on this dude. If he genuinely said he didn't have it in a vehicle, he bought it the way it was, never ran it, then not his fault, just sucks. I got screwed. What can you do? But there's always the flip side that who knows, maybe he knew. But can't go down that rabbit hole. I just got to deal with it and move on. So anyways, what ended up happening is did the swap. Seriously, guys, a weekend swap. This is not a long process. My process ended up being 3 months for completely other reasons, completely unrelated to swapping a vehicle. This was just a bad transmission. So anyways, got the transmission in the vehicle, everything hooked up, seemingly everything good, computer good. All of a sudden, faults. As soon as I put the car into park, reverse, drive, neutral, as soon as I moved that gear lever, the car would freak out. And I was like, okay, hopefully just basic settings, not a big deal. Check my fluid levels, make sure everything is good there, whatever. Turns out, not at all. The initial codes I had were for, I might try to find the code and type it in here on this video. But the initial code I had was for the N215 solenoid valve in the mechatronic. So after a bunch of research, everybody says it's not able to be fixed. So I did some research, found there's companies out there fixing it, found out there must be a way, found a Chinese part and ordered it. It took a long time to get here. During that process, I found a second transmission. Now that second transmission was out of a Mark I TT, an 04, 05 TT from DOS Parts. Thank you to DOS Parts for helping me through this entire process. They had some advice here and there, answered a few questions that I had, helped me search for parts, helped me find components as best they could. This was a very unique swap, so no one had all the answers, but everybody had a lot of ideas. So thank you to DOS Parts for any of their help during this. But anyways, I replaced that valve once it came in. Didn't fix the issue. Fixed that problem, but then I started getting further mechatronic faults. So what I ended up doing was picking up that second transmission. So first we had an 08 TT transmission, and that included the bevel box. So this guy right here. Actually, which one is it? I don't know. One of these two. This guy this is the one. Okay, so this one came with that transmission. That transmission is right there. So that is the 04, 05 TT trans. So that's the box that came with it. That's the one that came with my current transmission. We'll get to that. So put that transmission in, the Mark I transmission. That transmission immediately worked great. Had one fault for data alteration of the ECU, but that's simply because the mechatronic codes don't match. The 3.6 doesn't want to look for that old of a mechatronic. So anyways, there's that fault. It doesn't affect anything, or it isn't right now because that same fault is in the car at the moment. So end up getting, like I said, that transmission in the car. Ran the car not on the ground. Ran it in the air. Wheels not on, but CV shafts hooked up. I had a lot of trouble finding shafts that worked because the half shafts, if that's what you were on refer to, sorry, my terminology sucks because this is not what I do. I'm not a mechanic whatsoever. But anyways, the half shafts don't accept the same CV shafts as the Mark II transmission. So I had to swap shafts, figure that out. Anyways, got them in, got what was supposed to be proper shafts, what we thought was proper shafts in the car for a Mark 1 TT. Everything went great. Mechatronic happy, transmission happy, shifts gears, blah, blah, blah. Put the full thing back together, wheels on, back into the driveway, crazy amount of grinding noise. It's like, okay, something catching up, drive shaft hooking on a control arm, or usually actually the sway bar in these, but that exact noise. Can't find anything. End up finding out that the hub for the CV shaft, or that end piece, that outer CV joint, that cup, doesn't slide all the way into the cup. It's like a millimeter. You can't really actually see it. I can bolt it on, everything, but it doesn't fully go all the way in, and it's just that, call it a quarter of an inch most, that it doesn't slide all the way into the spindle. So that created a whole new world of issues. That meant I had to swap the bevel boxes. This is where we ran into even more problems. There was no way to swap the bevel boxes. Let me flip the camera back. I now currently have 3 of these, one from each transmission. So this is the one from the 05 TT. That is the one from an unknown date, thought to be an 08 A3. But it's the same style as this, but not dead on. There are very slight measurement differences between here to here, as well as on the actual half shafts themselves. So that created issues with not being able to just simply swap half shafts, not simply able to fully swap the actual bevel boxes. There's also very tiny, no, I think all the differences were on here. I don't think any of the differences were on the transmissions themselves, but like even like this piece and this piece, actually you can see it on these two. That piece is much smaller, like less width and depth to it than that one. So hence they can't be swapped. So those are both a very similar unit. They accept the same end style of half shaft, which is the earlier generation of shafts on these, which also are the ones that then do not fit the actual spindle, hub, whatever, on the Tiguans. So that put the hold on that transmission being my answer. So then I take that transmission back out. I take the mechatronic from that transmission and I put it in the original trans I had. So right now that's actually the blown up mechatronic from the original transmission. The Mark 1 TT mechatronic is in the Mark 2 TT transmission. That all works great. That made that work phenomenally. But get it on the ground, once again, get driving it, almost immediately the clutches slip. So all that effort, all that time comes down to this entire transmission that I first bought is completely screwed. This transmission was not pulled out of a vehicle that was wrecked and was going to the scrapyard. They pulled this out as a good unit. This was pulled because it blew up. And if it came out of a scrapyard, the person scrapped the car because of the cost of fixing the transmission. So this was the death of whatever vehicle it came from. And I got screwed. It's whether there was intent there or not, who knows? Can't say. Doesn't matter. Can't dwell on it. Try not to. But it meant finding another transmission. I had obviously posted a bunch of stories about this. I had been on social media about it. Not a ton. Never gave out all the information because I was frustrated. I was depressed. It caused a lot of turmoil. There's 3 months. This is my daily driver. I don't have another vehicle to drive. That's my daily. The wife has the Atlas. We sold the 19 Tiguan before going into this process. The 2.5 Tiguan never got running again after it failed. So this was the daily driver. It created a lot of chaos, and it created a lot of self-doubt. As much as I thought I had the answers on what was going wrong, I really was never sure. Could it possibly have all come back to wiring in the end? Yeah, it could have. It didn't, thankfully, but you start questioning that for sure. And yeah, that didn't put me in a very good mental state. I essentially wrote off cars and this car hobby permanently. It really, I don't know if I'll ever get as back into it as I was. I definitely obviously still enjoy the car scene, enjoy working on them when it's not swap stuff. I enjoy the challenge, but this signed me off of it, to be honest with you. Thankfully, after hunting, I found a guy super local to me, with one of these transmissions. Was no longer going to use it for his project. So thank you, Alex, for giving up this transmission, and at a great price. It was super fair on pricing on it. There was also some nervousness from both of us. He also had never had it in a vehicle, so we didn't know. So this was a third attempt on a third transmission that really we didn't know all the answers on. Put it in the vehicle. Perfect. The only issue that I did have is it still was running the older style of bevel box. One of the ones on the floor that I showed you is from that transmission. Fortunately, the measurements on that bevel box were all, as much as the shafts were different, the bevel box could be swapped. So I did. So now that is running the Mark II Audi TT trans, which is from an 08, in an 08 A3 bevel box. Yep. Yes. Yeah, from the A3 from Alex. So that's the one that's in there. Sorry, that's the transmission in there. The bevel box that's in there is from that first really blown up transmission. And so now we are on the road. The only fault that we have in the system, transmission runs great. It's an early gen DSG, so from what I understand, it is kind of normal for it to have some hesitation and a little more clunkiness than the later DSGs did, but it works great. It shifts great, it takes off great. Not having really any issues there. There is the one fault still in the ECU, it's in the TCU side of things for data altered. Again, I'll see if I can find the exact code and type it in here when I'm editing the video. But yeah, so that code is still in there, but it's not affecting anything. It's accepting basic settings. It's running great, no issues. I don't know if that'll stop a tune if I end up deciding to tune the transmission, whether it be through Dominate or another company. But ideally it would be through Dominate again. That's who's tuned this thing 3 times in the past, twice with me, once with the previous owner. But yeah, I'd love for it to go back to them, but we'll see. We'll see if I even actually end up tuning it. I'm happy with it as it is. But yeah, so we finally have a functioning 3.6 swapped Volkswagen Tiguan. That's 4Motion and now DSG. So it genuinely now deserves the R36 badge that Peter so kindly gifted me at Berlin. That's backwards, I think, because we're using the forward-facing camera. But yeah, so the swap is finally complete. It's running great, love it, super happy with it. But there was a lot of challenges with this. I will, over the next little bit, once I have time, don't have time right now, get through the holidays, stuff like that, get through some stuff with the business, and then we will retype the spreadsheet that someone gave me for the swap. I'll make it a little bit more clear for our lingo. There's little weird things, British to Canadian, or not real English over here across the pond, that made it confusing. But Aaron was great with hopping on Messenger with me and going back and forth on what a few things referred to. But yeah, I had some phenomenal help with wiring once again on this car. Did it all myself, but had quite a bit of virtual guidance through a couple friends who have done DSG swaps on either other VRs or in Aaron's case, actually also a Tiguan. He's got a 3.2 DSG Tiguan. I believe it's still 4Motion. Yeah, it's definitely just still 4Motion over in the UK. But he's now swapped up to a 7-speed DSG, which is really cool. We don't have those here, TQ 500. But yeah, so thank you to him as well for all of his guidance. He had a crazy amount of guidance for me through swapping everything. So thank you to him. Yeah, so we are now running. We're happy. I do have a little bit of flywheel chatter, I believe is where it's coming from. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like an old DSG TDI chatter box that we used to get every once in a while at the dealership when I worked there. So I think that's what it is. I do have another flywheel here. I will eventually, not won't wait too long, I will swap that for the other flywheel that I do have here. But that does mean transmission out. Once again, fortunately, it won't be fully out. I can drop it and swap out the flywheel kind of without fully pulling the transmission away from the vehicle. So it'll save some time, but it's still going to be a bit of a project. So we'll do that eventually here before I do too much driving on it. But yeah, that's kind of the story. That's what happened. Like I said, I'm not a technician. I'm not a mechanic. I have a more than full-time job. I own two businesses that keep me busy, till fairly late at night. You don't really want to come home and work after that. Don't have time in the mornings. Have a crap ton of paperwork that has to be done on the side as well behind the scenes that nobody sees. So I'm 40-50 hours in the shop working a job, and then also having to do the paperwork on the outside of that. So it's a lot, and that doesn't leave a lot of time for this stuff, especially with having kids. So this took a long time, and then waiting for parts, trying to track down new transmissions, all that type of stuff. So this took a long time to actually complete this build, but it's not because it's a hard swap. I just simply got screwed on the transmission I first bought. Made a mistake buying the second one, to be honest with you. Yeah, so all in all, we're here. I'm happy with it. It is a world of difference driving the vehicle, and definitely recommend doing it. And yeah, I own pizza shops. Andy's Legendary Pizza. Go to the Lambeth or Kilworth locations, Google, and write a review. Good one, obviously. I don't care if you live in Tokyo. Write a review. It always helps. You guys want me to keep on building cars? This needs to succeed. Go.